Thank you to the sponsor of this video, Zen in the Car, powered by Cannabis. More on them in a moment.
Senator, how long do the hallucinatory effects of marijuana stay in the blood system?
Welcome to Aviva Sings Out, y'all! Thanks for coming back to check out Part 3. In Parts 1 and 2, we covered Senator Ramon's presentation of SB 263 with questions from the committee, as well as his presentation on SR 165. And before we continue the coverage of this February 3rd hearing, I want to bring something else to your attention. Meet Representative Darshan Kendrick. Let's see what sponsored legislation she has. Oh, what's this? Remove cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act? Yes, please! That would make everything so much easier. On January 13th, 2021, this resolution was filed, then read it 2 times, and then assigned to the House Committee Judiciary Non-Civil. Who is the chairman? Representative James Burchett. All right. So what do you feel about that, mister? We're gonna write to you and let you know how amazing we think it is. And of course, we will write to all of the sponsors as well, thanking them, hoping that they stay on it. And this is how we build relationships with our legislators. Add them to the list. Speaking of relationships, last year on March 11th when I testified, this footage magically disappeared from the live stream. We just got it and we posted it, but something else happened on the anniversary of this 311. A bill to be entitled, an act to amend Article 2 of Chapter 13 of Title 16 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to the regulation of controlled substances so as to provide that Delta-8 THC derived from hemp is not considered marijuana or tetrahydrocannabinol, tetrahydrocannabinolic acid, or a combination thereof for purposes of the Georgia Controlled Substance Act, to provide that it shall not be unlawful to purchase, possess, manufacture, distribute, sell, or consume Delta-8 THC derived from hemp, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Yay! Thank you, Chairman Mullis, for SB 614. You think since you're the rules chairman, you can push this through even though we've already reached crossover date. And speaking of sponsors, and now for a word from our sponsor.
Cannabis is for 2 purposes. It's medical use and industrial use.
Zen in the Car is powered by Cannabis. Subscribe to all their doohickeys by clicking on links in the boxes you like best. Also, be sure to catch the Zen in the Car podcast on the platform that best agrees with all your confirmation biases. It's the podcast for the spiritually minded liberty activist on the go. Neat.
The endocannabinoid deficiency is real.
Also, don't forget to subscribe to our mothership, zeninthecar.com, powered by Cannabis. Be good for you.
Every system in the body that I've looked at, the endocannabinoid system is involved with.
Now resuming, End the Georgia Cannabis Prohibition, Part 3. Okay, remember how we were talking about the banking issues in the Part 2 video? Well, there's actually a resolution in Georgia that can help resolve this as well. How amazing is that? I'm just going to read you part of HR 249. Here we go. Whereas, because cannabis is still illegal under federal law, a robust compliance measure will limit confusion and uncertainty to create legitimate parameters for banking, insurance, investment, taxation, and other matters. And whereas while cannabis businesses have been denied access to banking services, many states have utilized locally chartered and state bank institutions for medical cannabis programs. And whereas having a robust compliance measure would work in conjunction with the Federal Secure and Fair Enforcement Safe Banking Act to help mitigate the risk of businesses and firms that serve and invest in the cannabis industry from being subject to civil liability because of their association with the cannabis industry. And whereas lacking access to banks, cannabis businesses often operate in cash, and better regulation, transparency, and government oversight will also decrease criminal activity. I.e., what did they call that? Oh yeah.
As well as cash and money laundering being used at dispensaries.
But is it money laundering? Or just having no option but cash? This resolution, spearheaded by Micah Gravely, now sits in the Regulated Industries Committee, chaired by our good friend, Chairman Powell.
This is about fixing a system.
But just an FYI, Representative Darshan Kendrick's resolution would also fix it. Look here. A resolution urging the United States Congress to enact legislation removing cannabis from the Federal Controlled Substances Act, exempting certain activities related to cannabis, facilitating the full spectrum of private banking services for cannabis-related businesses, and encouraging scientific research as related to cannabis products and for other purposes. right, let's get back to the February 3rd hearing where we are starting with the questions about SR 165. SR 165 is a resolution to put on a ballot for Georgia citizens to decide whether or not they want cannabis to be legalized. Welcome again to the Regulated Industries and Utilities Committee in the Senate, featuring all these members and starring Chairman Calcert.
But today, Republican senators held a rare hearing on 3 proposed measures.
So, was this a Republican meeting? Let's do a fact check. Nope. Senator Lucas is a Democrat. Senator Butler is a Democrat. Okay, that's 2 Democrats. The chair is a Republican. Senator Calcert. Senator Tippins is a Republican. Okay, that's 2 for 2. Here we go. Senator Doc Rett, he's a Democrat. That's 3 to 2. Senator Jeff Mullis, he's a Republican. 3 to 3. We've got Senator Burt Miller, he's a Republican. Okay, now it's 4 and 4 with Democrat. Senator Harbison. And what's the majority with? Anyway, Senator Gooch, he's a Republican. That's 5. Senator Frank Ginn, that's 6 Republicans. That's 7 Republicans. Senator Kennedy. Oh, we've got another Democrat. That's Senator Anderson. Senator John Albers. We've got a Chief Deputy Whip, whatever that is. That's a Republican. And finally, Senator Matt Brass. 1 more Republican. So we do have 9 Republicans and 5 Democrats. So they are the majority. So if it indeed is Democrats versus Republican on this issue, the question is can we get 2 of the Republicans to betray their tribe and support all of these cannabis measures? We probably need 3 for the majority, otherwise it would just be a tie, and I'm not sure how that would work out. Now, Senator Brass is actually a spokesperson for the cannabis medical bill that I still need to review, SB 195. So the question is he just in support of cannabis in general, or will this undermine his efforts with his cannabis bill to go ahead and support Senator Rahman's bill, because SB 195 is very tight, you know, just allowing, I think it was just 5 or 6 people to process and sell the low THC oil. I mean, maybe it was just tight because that was the way they got it passed though. And so maybe he's totally fine with it being a little bit looser for the freedom of this plant. We will find out. And since it already passed, it really shouldn't be an issue, right? Either way, if you're Matt Brass's constituent, go ahead and call him because he works for you and he will listen to you if you want these bills to pass.
It's a choice between compassion and the will to win.
I mean, from the voter perspective, we all know that cannabis is not a partisan issue. Democrats and Republicans, and I would say even mostly Republicans as far as voters go, are really in support of cannabis. If you don't feel like pressing pause, just summarize the articles I'm flashing above this. 71% of millennial Republicans do support legalization, and 78% of the Democrat millennials also support it. So that's not too much of a difference. Maybe the next step is for Senator Rahman to do some kind of a consensus where he just puts out a questionnaire to the general public of Georgia and finds out how many people would vote to legalize cannabis. Remember, public demand is a power that they absolutely look at.
So anybody who has a marijuana conviction on their record prior to the constitutional amendment could go petition the court to vacate that conviction?
After December 2022.
But the offense would have occurred before then, but after December 31st, 2022, they could petition the court to vacate any prior convictions.
That's correct.
All right. Any further questions of committee members concerning the constitutional amendment to legalize marijuana in Georgia? Senator Rett.
Just a little clarification. I would assume that the Department of Revenue would determine how much money goes towards transportation infrastructure and education.
I think Bill right now is 50-50. He's saying half for the transportation and half for the education.
Thank you.
You see, Senator Calcert, so it makes sense to then pull everyone out of jail or prison who has cannabis convictions. Don't you agree?
Senator Gooch.
Senator, are you suggesting that we allow citizens all over Georgia to smoke marijuana for recreational use?
What a novel idea. Someone's been paying attention.
Would there be any restrictions?
What a shocking concept. Swipe left, swipe left. Maybe we should put restrictions on sugar or GMOs.
What I'm saying is
corporations to ban it, still have drug testing work. You allow bus drivers to smoke marijuana and drive a school bus the next morning, or what's your thoughts on that?
Well, if somebody has a medical prescription, they are allowed to go retail store and buy. That particular person might be exempt.
Swipe right.
They're going to take a test. The corporation has to decide based on, if somebody's sick, And then if they have a prescription, they can go get certain amount of marijuana to use it for that particular purposes. The commission will decide exactly what is the consequence would be, but they should be able to get it. That's the whole purpose.
Let's use the example of a school bus driver. The bus driver had a prescription for the use of recreational marijuana.
It wouldn't be recreational if it was a prescription. Though I do hear if you have NDD, nature deficit disorder, you will be prescribed a daily recreational walk in the woods. Calling it recreational just doesn't work for me in general. I mean, alcohol is alcohol. You might call it recreational drinking, recreational smoking, but you can't call an herb, you can't call a noun recreational. It just doesn't work that way.
You can't label a plant
with a permanent adjective. That's trickery. You can say it's used for recreational purposes.
You wouldn't say dancing cannabis. You wouldn't say singing cannabis, like legalized singing cannabis. Cannabis is cannabis is cannabis. If it sings, if it dances, if it's playful, if it's serious. Scientifically, you can't put an adjective in front of a noun and say that that's what the noun is. The noun's the noun's the noun. Noun.
They would be legally allowed to use that marijuana and still drive a school bus.
Well, that's up to the school board or the state has to decide, and I don't think that specifically this bill says anything about it.
You don't have any regulations or rules on that?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Other questions from board members? Senator Tippins, you're recognized.
Senator, how long do the hallucinatory effects of marijuana stay in the blood system?
I do not know that exactly.
I think that one's hard for you to answer, Senator Ramon, because it's kind of a trick question. I mean, in actuality, reports of hallucinogen-like effects of cannabis are quite rare. According to this article, most case reports describing hallucinations following acute cannabis exposure involve individuals with current psychosis or a family history of psychosis, populations that are known to have an atypical response to cannabis. A growing literature continues to explore the relationship between cannabis use and development of psychosis among individuals with an underlying vulnerability for psychosis. While perceptual alterations in healthy individuals during the acute effects of THC have been described, empirical reports describing hallucinogen-like effects of cannabis and cannabis constituent in controlled settings and in healthy participants without a family history of psychosis are quite rare. This article is linked below. Calamus root, on the other hand, which you can get conveniently from Amazon, can be used as a hallucinogen, amongst other things.
Do you know how long after marijuana is used that it's detectable in the blood system?
Do you? Do you?
It's 24 to 48 hours, I believe.
I got my gun in my pocket and I'm ready to fight to keep it illegal. I'm gonna take a seat now.
Do you know the test limits of acceptable marijuana limits in the blood to have a clean drug screen under the laws of Georgia?
I have to look at it.
I wish you would and report back to us.
The initial test needs to be at least 15 nanograms per milliliter of our blood in order to be a positive test. But this needs to go on for further confirmation that it's not a false positive, and then it's sent to a more stringent test, which needs to be 15 nanograms per milliliter. Here are some things that can cause a false positive in at least a urine test: secondhand cannabis smoke, weight loss pills, poppy seeds, mouthwash, antidepressants, antibiotics, CBD oil, and antihistamines.
Senator Gibbs, proceed.
Thank you. I get to wear the badge I wear, and mine says transportation on it today, so I'm always worried about what's going to impede our truck drivers and freight and logistics moving around the state. One of the things anybody with the commercial driver's license, commonly referred to as a CDL, has to do a random drug screens. And one of the things that I'm hearing, and I apologize, I was listening on the monitors outside, but when I look, that's going to be one of those things. Anybody that holds a CDL that takes part in marijuana is going to show up on a drug test and they'll be put out of their work. I look at that side of it, but the other one that concerns me is we have no, that I know of, any field sobriety test to see whether somebody is impaired or just they have it still in their system. And so for me, when you start looking at the insurance liability side of this stuff, because they're all this will stay in your system for up to a month. And when you look,
Nothing to see here.
The problem is going to be, did this person, were they just smoking dope and are they impaired, or was it 30 days ago and maybe they've got a remnant in their system?
It's like the video game, a remnant from the cannabis ashes.
There's no field sobriety test like there is for alcohol. So how do you propose to deal with that from all of the drivers all over the state?
Well, Senator, I think all the states that legalize, those states have some drivers too. They're driving trucks and stuff. Those truck drivers over there, they're not driving on the road.
Well, even just the regular motorist out there, I'm concerned about what happens with them. And for me, I don't know. That's why I'm asking the question. You know, there are states that are breaking the federal law and have quote, legalized marijuana use in their state.
It just bothers me that he says they're breaking the law, like implying like we're doing something wrong, we're breaking the law. I mean, it's just like, it's not really legal, it's legal in quotes. It's like, this is just such a mess.
For me, I'm concerned that how does an officer know whether you're impaired or not, and how are those states dealing with it?
I'm not knocking his questions. They are good questions. They're just not solution-oriented. They're fear-oriented. And it's not like we don't already have DUI drug charges in Georgia, so it just feels like you might be playing dumb. And he's right that you shouldn't just say that someone is impaired if they just have it in their blood. That shouldn't be, like, literally you probably can have 50 nanograms per milliliter of cannabis in your blood. I'm sorry, THC, and it doesn't impair you. I mean, it could be from secondhand smoke. So that is a good point. Like, don't penalize people just for having it in their blood. There has to be other ways to detect that they're truly impaired than it just being in their blood. So thank you, Senator Ginn.
Well, we have to look at the other state, how they're dealing with it. We have to do the same thing they're doing in the other state.
Rewind!
There's no field sobriety test like there is for alcohol.
Yes, of course they have a field sobriety test. I got you. This is what's going on.
If you're pulled over for suspected drug driving, an officer will test sobriety differently than a suspected drunk driver. A driver under the influence of marijuana drives differently from a driver under the influence of alcohol. Drunk drivers are more likely to drive faster and overestimate their driving skills. The opposite is true of drivers under the influence of marijuana. I'm going to say cannabis. You know I don't like that word, marijuana. It's a trick word. Many are much more cautious, if not paranoid, and often overcompensate by driving too slow or stopping too long at a stop sign. Because of the different effects of alcohol versus cannabis impairment, the field sobriety tests for cannabis must be different. An officer currently cannot test cannabis content in the blood with a breathalyzer. THC levels must be measured by a blood test. A urine test can show a positive result if the driver used cannabis within a few days or weeks of the traffic stop. Roadside sobriety testing for cannabis. Currently, police do not have a breathalyzer test for cannabis impairment. If pulled over, you may be asked to perform a series of field sobriety tests conducted by a drug recognition expert. The officer may also immediately arrest you for impaired driving. Drug recognition experts. The state of Colorado uses drug recognition experts to determine whether a person is driving under the influence of cannabis or another drug. A drug recognition expert is a police officer who takes an elective 72-hour course that will train them to determine whether a driver is driving under the influence of drugs or alcohol, rule out health conditions, and determine what substance the driver is impaired by. Drug recognition expert follows a 12-step process determined by a standard checklist. These steps have been determined by the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration. The NHSTA has standardized the process. The tests are conducted in the exact same way every time. A drug recognition expert follows the 12 steps exactly, even if a step is not relevant to indicate level of impairment. That's ironic, the 12 steps like AA. The standard 12-step process followed by drug recognition experts. 1. Breathalyzer test. 2. Interview by officer. 3. Preliminary examination and pulse. 4. Eye exam. 5. Divided attention tasks like finger to nose and patting the belly. Vital signs and pulse. Dark room examination. That sounds creepy. Muscle tone, injection sites and pulse. Interrogation statements and other observations. Opinion of evaluator. Chemical examination. Arrested for cannabis. DUI.
Cheez-Its, now you got me thinking about my ex-boyfriend. Oh, man, Joe. Oh, I hope we're doing okay in there.
If I didn't love you, why would I get upset by your bad habits?
What bad habits?
Like smoking this plant you grew.
garden of even gold is dynamite.
By this point, you probably figured out the main product that this family is known for is gunpowder. Nope, it's not what you expect people to talk about when they think DuPont competed with hemp for their product.
Wait a minute. Are we getting down to the reason why people get so explosive about cannabis?
If you've been arrested for a DUI involving cannabis in Colorado, you need an experienced attorney on your side to help you understand your rights and reduce your penalties. Okay, this is a lawyer's site. What else did I want to say? I wanted to say something else. Gosh darn it. What did I want to say? I will link this site below. Did you have anything else to say? Just because cannabis is in your system does not mean you are impaired. Some folks are going to have the THC in their blood just because they're taking medical cannabis. And everyone can handle a different level of THC. It's just how it is. So either maybe raise the THC limit or just allow the impairment test to be more of what is used instead of the detectable blood levels. It's a complicated issue, but we can get through this.
Thank you. Senator Rep. While we have you, let's go ahead and talk about the other bill, 264.
Okay, before we talk about Senate Bill 264, which would repeal the current low THC law and adopt a full comprehensive medical cannabis program, let's go back to SR 165 and just talk about how other states have done this and are trying to do this. For example, Iowa Democrats, again, this is like a partisan issue for some reason, unveiled the cannabis resolution to put legalization on ballot for voters to decide. And here it says that Iowa Democratic senators on Wednesday released the text of a joint, pun intended, resolution to put the question of cannabis legalization before voters on the state's ballot. It says that the possession, growth, cultivation, processing, manufacturing, preparation, packaging, transferal, consumption, and retail sale and purchase of cannabis or products created from or including cannabis by persons 21 years of age or older shall be lawful. I love that growth and cultivation part. That is so important. These three Democratic senators, they say they first unveiled their cannabis reform last month, but I saw a 2021 article about it as well. And here, Normal did a great job in giving you links to the Iowa legislative website so you can see the actual bills. And so if you click on the Senate Joint Resolution, you see that, and it even says there, it was in 2003. That's linked below the Normal website so you can go to the bills and see it yourself, especially you Iowa peeps, and you can take action to support it and shout it out to the world. But what's really cool about theirs is they have this little section over here, the lobbyist declarations, where you can see who's for and against it, which is really cool, I think. I don't know if Georgia has that. So when you go here, you see that the two against it are the Iowa Police Chief Association. And you see that the governor's office is undecided. The Department of Public Health is undecided. So y'all get out there and educate them and maybe they'll be for it. Patients for medical cannabis are for it. There's comments as well. I clicked on the comments and then it expands it. And so it's cool to read that as well. The plan is to pass the measure during their 100-day session. But why don't they try to get some Republican co-sponsors? What's the big deal? Why is it always Dems versus Repubs? Let's unite. Anyway, I tried to check on the movement of it. I don't see any movement, but they have 100 days in their session. Session ends the day before 420. We're doomed! In Georgia, it's a 40-day session, but they're not in succession. That rhymes. So 40 days. Why has Georgia got to be so biblical? That's such a biblical number. 40 days and nights that Moses went to Mount Sinai to receive God's laws, to receive the 10 Commandments, and he also sent spies for 40 days to investigate the land God promised. The prophet Jonah warned ancient Nineveh for 40 days that its destruction would come because of its many sins. In Christianity, there's 40 days being the period from the resurrection of Jesus to the ascension of Jesus. There are the 40 days preceding Easter. There's all kinds of things. 40 days is basically often a time of judgment, trials, and testing. 40 days and 40 nights during the flood. I mean, is this a metaphor? Making laws isn't a punishment. Or is it? Now, if Iowa doesn't free cannabis soon, like its neighboring Illinois has legalized cannabis for adults, Nebraska, Minnesota, and Missouri have decriminalized simple possession, if they don't free cannabis in Iowa, they're going to keep to the law of what it says now, which is that the first offense possession of even a single joint is punishable by up to 6 months in jail and a $1,000 fine, one of the most severe first offense penalties of the country. And honestly, at this point, we know who is the target of these penalties, of these ridiculous arrests. So if they don't deal with that soon, they might have situations like we just saw in Georgia from this case back in 2017, which just got settled in court this month, 2022. What happened was the police smelled cannabis at a house party. They entered and searched and found less than an ounce and arrested 70 people inside. The one joint could not have possibly belonged to all 70 people, their defense attorney stated. And basically, a lot of horrible things happened that night, which some folks are still processing and might process for the rest of their lives. They did win $900,000 to settle this federal lawsuit, which argued this whole experience was an attack on their basic human rights. The charges were dropped, thankfully, 12 days later, but these people's lives were turned completely upside down. It was a complete nightmare for them, says Gerald Weber with the Southern Center for Human Rights after filing the lawsuit. And this should be a reminder to everyone that literally just taking this plant from the hands of free humans is also a human rights issue in itself. And unfortunately, it's not all too uncommon what happened to these folks. Some were humiliated when they were forced to undergo strip searches at the jail. Some as young as 17 years old were ordered to remove all of their clothing in front of 2 or more deputies. Bend over at the waist, spread their buttocks with their hands. Trigger warning, sorry. Oh gosh. I mean, basically, just disgusting, and all under the name of keeping us safe, right? And healthy. And how many times has this happened to folks who had no support to file a lawsuit? Maybe they were homeless, or too traumatized, or just alone. What about when Flying Penguin Simon was taken away to jail in the Carolinas on our way to a gig for having half a joint tucked in the djembe strap that he borrowed from someone for the gig? I mean, can we still sue for that? Who knows what suffering he went through until we were able to pick him up a couple of weeks later. He even had to miss a couple pay gigs with his dance troupe. I mean, cruel and unusual punishment for sure, people. Enough is enough. Okay, Senator Kauser, back to you.
While we have you, let's go ahead and talk about the other bill, 264. I think it's pretty concise, so if you'll tell us about the Controlled Substances Therapeutic Relief Act.
I can tell you a couple of things. First of all, every single sponsor of this bill is a Democrat. I know. How come we can't have any Republican? At least in the hemp bills, there are crossovers of Republicans and Democrats, but dang. I will also read you a part of this bill that I think is very essential related to what we just spoke about with the arrests. Data from the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Uniform Crime Reports and the Compendium of Federal Justice Statistics show that approximately 99 out of every 100 cannabis arrests in the United States are made under state law rather than federal law. Consequently, changing state law will have the practical effect of protecting from arrest the vast majority of seriously ill patients who have a medical need to use cannabis. Also, I will say, look at all of these states, Alaska, Arizona, California, Colorado, Connecticut, etc., who have removed state-level criminal penalties for the medicinal use and cultivation of cannabis. So Georgia joins in this effort for the health and welfare of its citizens with SB 264. But what are the senators talking about while Senator Rahman gets ready to present this bill? You know what? I have an idea. Hey, buddy. Yeah, what's up? I'm listening.
This repeals the patient registry that we have now for the low THC oil.
I mean, doesn't that look a little suspicious? Listen to my interpretation of what they're saying, linked below. Don't laugh, don't laugh. You can hold it in.
This legislation would allow for a full medical marijuana program in Georgia.
What are you all laughing at? Have some respect for Senator Rahman. Come on already. That is a classic sideways smile, Mr. Kauser. Senator Kauser is just holding it in. Out the nose, out the nose. It just reminds me of being at a Passover Seder with my sister where she'd make me laugh when everyone was quiet.
Personally purchase up to 2 ounces of marijuana to keep up to 8 plants if they live in more than 120 miles away from the dispensary.
Okay, that's enough for now. We will start part 4 with the review of SB 264, as well as the testimonies from all of those opposed to cannabis.
I'm sorry, and I'm sure this will come at a future date.
Thank you so much for watching. Y'all have a really good day now. You hear? Stay tuned for part 4, because there's probably going to be 5 parts, and it's really tiring to do this all, so please pay attention. Please share it with all your friends so that we can take a break from all this educating and just focus on music for once, alright?
Hold on, Mary Lou. Before you say goodbye to everyone, I have some breaking news. Remember what I said about the Iowa laws continuing to hurt people if they don't free cannabis? Well, hello, Georgia. This just happened at 11:30ish a.m. today, March 21st, 2022. Yup.
Something happened right here in Butts County, Georgia, and Governor Kemp tweeted about it.
Governor Kemp spitting out that all too familiar catchphrase. Congrats and thank you to those working so hard to keep Georgians safe. Oh yeah, we are so much safer now. Thanks.
Bob Marley said, old pirates, yes they rob I. So what's Brother D gotta say? Open up! Is there a plant in there? You better not be sitting there peacefully with a plant. Governor Kemp, I hope you see what everyone else is saying. They're calling it medicine. They're quoting Harry Anslinger, reefer makes darkies think they're as good as white men. I mean, come on, this is crazy. They're saying a drug bust is about meth, cocaine, and heroin and crack, not cannabis.
And you cannot deny that this guy looks shazomed as hell.
Oh yeah, that was good stuff, man. I sure hope you're not throwing that out, unless it's spiked with some crazy stuff or chemicals. Ryan's all professional in his tie, and he'll even say, you complain about the rise in violent crime, but now you're bragging about prioritizing enforcement against peaceful people. What's up, Jerry? It came from Michigan, it was going to Florida. How is that staying in Georgia? How is that keeping Georgia safe? Josh is like, great news that Butts County, Georgia has eliminated all local crime so they can waste tax dollars popping weed shipments between legal states. The war on drugs is over. Drugs won. That's what Matt said.
Federal government has lied to the people of this country about marijuana for a generation. We have seen a generation, particularly of black and brown youth, locked up for offenses that should have not resulted in any incarceration whatsoever. In every state where cannabis reform was on the ballot in this country, it passed. It passed with overwhelming support. Drugs have won.
Governor's like, big win for Butts County, Georgia. I'm like, come on. Cannabis is not a drug. Avian's like, please publish the total cost expended to capture these 300 pounds of cannabis in terms of man-hour, salary paid, etc. Taxpayers deserve to know the resources used to take one more drug dealer off the street and decide if those funds aren't better spent elsewhere. Good point, Avian. Zane's like, I pay my income tax with money coming from the legal cannabis industry. When will you help push Georgia forward to catch up with the will of the people? Preach, boy, preach. See, Senator Cowser, these are the people. Matthew's like, wow, what heroes. You stopped someone from getting alternative treatments for cancer-related issues, and you've made the midnight fast food line smaller. Well done. Thank you, Matthew, for your 2 cents. Government's butting into someone else's medicinal business in Butts County. I think they've got a reputation now.
No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Butts County likes big buds and they cannot lie.
Craig's like, breaking news. Plant recognized for medicinal benefits for thousands of years, stolen by government agents because they weren't getting their cut of the profit. Well, that about says it all, bro. Citizens arrest! Michael's like, if you really want to help law enforcement, legalize it so they don't have to waste taxpayer dollars on prohibition folly. Prohibition folly, I like that.
I mean, can you imagine if someone got arrested every time they got caught with a bottle of wine? I mean, seriously.
No pats on the back here, that's right. I'm not patting their back either, sorry, bro. 15 bucks says, or you could legalize it and tax it and stop feeding the for-profit prison system. You shouldn't be imprisoning people for what is increasingly legal all over. You, of all people, are definitely not keeping anyone safe, says the pineapple with a mask. Now do that with fentanyl, says D. Weed, question mark? I mean, come on. Frankie's like, throwing people in cages and ruining their lives over plants? Let's celebrate it. Woohoo! Good sarcasm, Frankie. Matt's like, pictured here are 3 unmasked armed robbers and their bosses after a successful theft, one of their largest scores to date. All right, Matt, maybe you should put them under citizen's arrest. What do you say?
Oh, pirates, yes, they rob I.
Okay, well maybe you all will stop making a joke out of all of this now that you see $900,000 are being given to the victims of cannabis-blamed abuse.
Stop the excusing of your abusing, using the accusing of cannabis using. I got a new song, eh?
Alright, this is fire, seriously. Stop excusing your abusing, using the accusing of cannabis using. We're all losing when you're excusing, you're abusing, thinking you're justified with the accusing of cannabis choosing. Cannabis choosing, cannabis juicing.
Cannabis juicing is the new thing. Time to get with the times. Don't you think the police force could have benefited from having a $900,000 cannabis education program? I guess this is one way to learn their lesson. Turning people's lives completely upside down and having to pay for it. When will legislators start to take this seriously? All of our lives were turned completely upside down because of the cannabis prohibition. Now is the time to return our relationship with cannabis to harmony.
Thank you so much for liking and sharing and commenting on this video. You are amazing. We gotta get Jim and Joe out of jail. Big hug to all of you. Love you. Be sure to watch Viva on Sunday Night Live. Just one left. And also, come see her at Golden Drops Cafe every Saturday, 3 to 5 p.m. And always make sure that you're not
butting into someone else's business.
Adjacent to a man impatiently erasing me and racing me. Are we a race that's free? Planetary times are chased with planetary changes. Are you with me when I say I see potentially we're here?